with a couple extra days, playing our first Tuesday night game on national TV, gives you a couple extra days to heal up a little bit. Possibly get some guys that have been out for a while, get them back for the game as well. Also get some extra time preparing for a very complicated, complex offense that Hugh Freeze runs at Arkansas State. Our guys have used the days wisely. We do like the extra time. I actually played 2 Tuesday night games in a row. Our focus is on this one right now. Obviously a very important game for us. Conference games, as we well know, certainly determine your postseason. Our guys are very well aware of that. We've gotten off to a great start, and they're looking forward to a great week of practice before heading up to Jonesboro on a Monday morning. So with that, open to all questions.
Coach Applin, he's ran the ball 62 times for 177 yards. How do you approach a quarterback like that who likes to run the ball so much?
Well, he's your leading rusher. You have to account for him. You know, I know that Frankie Jackson has been hurt because he's been a real productive player for him as well as Derek Lawson. He's a dual threat guy. You know, he's a guy that gets the ball out quick. He can also sit back there and find his receivers. You know, as we all know, Frampton, you know, gets a lot of the attention, but Stockermeyer and as of late, Josh Jarboe, you know, an Oklahoma signee originally, I do believe, have really developed in a big-time threat for them as well. So he's surrounded by great players. He's a great player himself. I know many picked him to be one of the players of the year in the conference also. He's a guy you have to be on point in terms of your assignments, in terms of your discipline with your eyes, and certainly have to hustle with the football because he can break it on you.
You mentioned their other running game. They have basically 4 running backs who have carried the ball 20-plus times. You know, Jackson and Lawson being the 2 real leaders at running back. What have you seen from this running game that's impressed you?
It's a big physical offensive line, you know, led by a guy that's been there a long time. You know, Castleloff has been there. I believe he's a Remington Award candidate as well. You know, last year he played with several of those offensive linemen for years. They have a couple of new guys in there, some junior college kids that have come in. They've really done a good job. I mean, they've protected, you know, Applin really well. They started running the ball really well, not only with the quarterback, but with you know, Frankie Jackson before he got hurt as well. So they pose a few problems for you. You know, you certainly have to, again, play physical, you have to play smart, and you have to be relentless. They also run a high-tempo offense and a varied tempo offense, try to catch you off guard in your personnel substitutions. Certainly with that aspect as well, even though you want fresh bodies in there all the time, you do have to be very strategic as to how you are going to substitute, and you have to be on point with that as well.
Coach, have you noticed a lot of differences between the way Arkansas State played last year with Coach Roberts and now how they're playing with Coach Freeze?
Very similar. I think Arkansas State has been, all coached in the Sun Belt, considered to be one of the best teams in the conference year in and year out. One of the big reasons is because what they've done up front. Their offensive line has always been very physical. I know they had one kid drafted this past year, you know, by the NFL. The year before, Carrington, who's still, you know, doing great things in the NFL as well as a defensive lineman, was drafted. And last year they had another guy who was a potential player, defensive player of the year in the conference. You know, and you look at it now with Dorvis Woods, you know, number 92 and number 99 Joyner. You're looking at a team that constantly applies pressure, and not by having to bring, you know, their different blitzes, their perimeter blitzes. Because if you look at their stat sheet, their safeties have sacks, their corners have sacks, linebackers have sacks, so do their defensive linemen. They still can do it without bringing all that stuff. So it's one of those deals where they've been successful defensively. You know, our defense and their defense right now has the top defense in the conference in terms of points allowed. Statistically, yards per game, they're a little ahead than we are. You know, we know statistics at the end of the day, they don't mean much, but there is something to it. So you're looking at a team that has prided himself in holding opponents and stopping opponents and making plays. You know, the interception a couple weeks ago for a touchdown was critical in beating Western Kentucky. You know, this past week they found a big play on special teams with the punt block return for a touchdown. But they're finding ways to win. And what they do up front and what they do defensively, certainly a big part of it. They were like that under Coach Roberts as well. Coach Freeze has done a great job, did a great job last year as a coordinator. I think they're continuing, you know, to do great things as a program.
Coach, you mentioned Joyner. He has 3.5 sacks this year. How do you contain a guy like that?
Joyner, as a matter of fact, Joyner, if I'm correct to say, he's had, I think, 9 or 10 sacks in his career. Most of them, I believe almost 8 of them, maybe even more, 8.5 sacks have come in the last 10 or 11 games. So he's a guy that's gotten really hot. I think Again, he's the guy this year outside, you know, and he has some good reserves that come and give him a break, so he doesn't have to play the entire game. I mean, they're getting his 45, 50 snaps out of him, and he's been really effective playing with a high motor. But again, I think you know, the two big guys inside, particularly, you know, Dorvis Woods provides, you know, the ability to allow him to have his one-on-one matchups outside with offensive tackles, and several teams that run, you know, protection where they're getting the back out and allowing that to happen, and he's taken advantage of it and done really well. He's not only has sacked the quarterback a lot, he's put a lot of pressure, and he's hit quarterbacks a lot as well.
And I'm sure that helps their rush defense. They haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher all year. I mean, how do you approach something like that? Does that change any game plan going?
You respect it. Yeah. You know, you respect it. You still make sure that you game plan to your strengths, and you still make sure that you game plan to where you see you can have an opportunity. You know, I think both teams at this time of year, you have an identity, but you still have to evolve as the season goes on. Both teams know that we have to somehow run the football, you know, and at the same time be efficient on third down. Nothing outside the regular football scope. But when a team statistically pops out like that, just gives you an idea about how stout they are, and at the same time that they're calling, you know, things that are being effective against a run. Sometimes with an extra man in there, sometimes by playing quarters and putting both safeties down in there, sometimes by stunning up front, sometimes by aligning those defensive tackles in different positions. Given different looks, a lot of movement. I know a lot of movement affected Monroe when they played them this last week. So it's a variety of things. They've been able to keep people off balance, and they've played extremely hard.
How do you balance having a few extra days, time for healing and recovery, versus maybe trying to get a little extra work?
That's a great question, because that is a tough balance. You have to sometimes save yourself from yourself as a coach, because again, you have to make sure you're doing the right thing by the players and their bodies. You know, we had 4.5 weeks of camp. We've had 6 games that involved a Friday night, a Thursday night, now going to Tuesday night. It's been a different type of schedule. You know, a lot of late night flights coming home, arriving real late, and having to get back to class. So I think you find yourself a happy medium. You make sure that you're getting a lot of, I would say, you know, those collective repetitions. You know, you're finding ways to watch more film. Walkthroughs could be a little bit more extensive. You make sure that when it's time for contact, you are playing physical football. But when you're not piling on those extra reps that maybe some guys don't need. While at the same time, some of the young guys that haven't played as much, you can definitely turn up the reps that those guys have not seen come game time, because they're going to have to play more as the season goes on. So I think that's a little bit of a balancing act, and you really have to make sure that, you know, one of the things that I do throughout the course of the day is always look for body language and demeanor. You know, see who's being able to play at a high energy level, your best players. Or do they have a high motor at the end of practice, or are they struggling? You know what I mean? Because they're the ones that are kind of, they're the barometer, you know, for your team's physical condition. You know, and I think it's important to monitor that closely.
You mentioned third down a little earlier. What can you do to get better on third down? Only 37% on third down conversions.
Well, the last 2 games we have improved drastically. You know, I think the previous, you know, 3-4 games before that, we were, you know, some games we were at 28 and 24%. In our last 2 games we were at 56, I believe, and then just under 50% last game. And that's with a couple of drops that would have put us almost at 60. So the last 2 games, the emphasis in practice has shown up in games. We have to continue along those lines. I know winning football, championship football, traditionally at the Division I level is about 44%. We need to be a little bit better in that. Okay, we're starting to climb there. And it ties into red zone. You know, I think, you know, we've talked about it before. That's where we have to continue improving. The good thing is that the areas, you know, in the red zone that we can improve upon are very evident. I think we have done enough things, you know, schematically and personnel-wise, that we're close in some of the things we're trying to accomplish, and it's a matter now of just repetition and execution, you know, at a high level, you know, in critical times, and being able to adjust in different looks. So we're going to continue getting different looks down in the red zone, and so far in practice we feel good about the direction.